The airport was loud, but I had never felt so completely alone. Suitcases rolled across the polished floor, their wheels clicking in uneven rhythms. Loudspeaker announcements echoed overhead in a language I barely understood, each syllable sharp and urgent. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. A couple hugged. Life was moving forward for everyone else. Except me. I stood still near the departure gate, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag as I watched my family walk away. My sister moved quickly, her shoulders squared, her suitcase gliding smoothly behind her like she knew exactly where she was going. My mother followed just a few steps behind, her posture calm, deliberate. She didn't turn around. At first, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. They're just checking something, I told myself. Maybe the gate changed. Maybe I misunderstood. I waited. Seconds passed, then a minute, then another. The crowd swallowed them piece by piece until all I could see were strangers' backs and flashing departure screens. That's when panic crept in. Not all at once, slowly, like cold water seeping through cracks. I reached into my purse for my phone. My hands shook as I unlocked the screen. No signal. I refreshed it again and again, as if that would magically fix everything. Still nothing. My chest tightened. Okay, breathe. Just find your documents. I opened my bag, pushing aside clothes, toiletries, folded papers. My fingers moved faster, rougher. Passport. Not there. Ticket. Gone. I froze. A sharp pressure wrapped around my ribs, squeezing the air out of my lungs. My heartbeat thundered so loudly, I was sure people nearby could hear it. No, this isn't happening. I dumped the contents of my bag onto the floor, ignoring the stares. Lip balm, a sweater, loose change, but no passport, no ticket, nothing that could get me home. That was the moment the truth landed. They didn't forget me. They left me. On purpose. Heat rushed through my body, followed by a sudden chill that made my teeth chatter. My ears rang. The airport lights blurred, stretching into long white streaks. Why would they do this? I thought. What did I do wrong? My mind raced backward, searching for clues. The whispered conversations. The way my mother insisted on holding my documents just in case. My sister's impatience every time I asked a question. I had explained it all away. Because admitting the truth would have hurt too much. I scanned the crowd desperately. Half-hopping, I'd see them coming back, laughing, saying it was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. My legs felt weak, so I leaned against a pillar, sliding down until I was sitting on my suitcase. The cold surface pressed through my clothes, grounding me just enough to keep me from collapsing completely. I felt exposed, small, invisible. People walked past me without slowing down. Some glanced at the mess on the floor, then quickly looked away. No one stopped to ask if I was okay. That hurt almost as much as what my family had done. Inside my head, a quiet, trembling voice whispered, "You trusted them." Shame settled in before fear. Shame that I had believed this trip was about healing. Shame that I had let my guard down. Shame that my own blood could look at me and decide I was disposable. I pressed my palms against my eyes, fighting tears. Don't cry, I told myself. Not here. But tears slipped through anyway, hot and uncontrollable. I wiped them quickly, embarrassed by my own vulnerability. Another announcement echoed through the terminal, final boarding for a flight I was supposed to be on. That's when fear finally arrived. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, paralyzing kind. I didn't know the language. I didn't know the city. I didn't know where I would sleep that night. And the people who were supposed to protect me had made a choice. They chose to walk away. As I sat there, surrounded by strangers, a thought crept into my mind, one that chilled me more than the cold floor beneath me. If my own family could do this, what else were they capable of? I didn't know it yet, but that question would change everything. Because being abandoned in that airport wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. Mini cliffhanger. At that moment, I still believed I had been left behind by accident. I had no idea the truth would be far worse. If you had asked me a month earlier whether my family would ever abandon me like that, I would have laughed. Not because we were perfect. We weren't. But because I truly believed there were lines you didn't cross, things you didn't do to your own blood. I was wrong. The idea of the trip was planted gently, like a suggestion meant to bloom on its own. My sister mentioned it first, casually, over the phone. She talked about how long it had been since we'd all been together somewhere new, how much stress I'd been under lately, how I deserved a break. "You're always doing things for everyone else," she said. "When do you do something for yourself?" Her words hit a sore spot. I had spent most of my adult life being the dependable one. The one who stayed late, picked up extra shifts, helped with bills, watched kids when someone needed a break. I told myself that was just who I was. Strong, reliable. But underneath, that strength was exhaustion. So when my mother joined the conversation a few days later, echoing the same sentiments, it felt like confirmation. "We need this as a family," she said softly. "We've all been through so much. A change of scenery would do us good." I remember standing in my kitchen, phone pressed between my shoulder and ear, staring at the sink full of dishes. Her voice sounded warm, familiar, safe. Maybe this really is about healing, I thought. I didn't notice how carefully they avoided details. Whenever I asked about the itinerary, the accommodations, the length of the stay, the answers were vague. "Don't worry about it," my mother said. "I'll handle everything." That should have been my first real warning. I had always been the one who handled things. Schedules, documents, backup plans. Letting go of that control felt uncomfortable, but also relieving. I told myself it was okay to trust. A week before the trip, my mother asked to hold onto my passport and important papers. "Just in case," she said. "You know how you are when you're nervous. I don't want you misplacing anything." She laughed lightly, like it was a joke. I laughed too. Inside, something twisted, but I pushed the feeling down. She's my mother, I reminded myself. She wouldn't hurt me. The night before we left, I barely slept. My mind buzzed with unease I couldn't name. I kept telling myself it was just travel anxiety. I double-checked my bag even though my documents weren't there. I hated that part of me that felt exposed without them. Still, I went. At the airport, everything moved fast. Too fast. My sister rushed ahead, snapping at me to keep up. My mother took charge at every counter, handing over documents before I could even reach for them. I noticed how little they involved me. At one point, I asked where exactly we were staying. "You ask too many questions," my sister said, irritation flashing across her face. "Just relax for once." I swallowed my response. That old reflex kicked in, the one that told me keeping the peace was more important than being heard. On the plane, as the engines roared and the ground fell away beneath us, I stared out the window, watching the city shrink. A strange thought crossed my mind. If something went wrong, I wouldn't know what to do. I shook it off quickly. "Stop being dramatic," I scolded myself. "They're your family." But families don't make you feel invisible. They don't make you feel like a burden for asking basic questions. They don't make you feel like your presence is inconvenient. I didn't have the language for what I was feeling yet, but it was there, quiet, persistent, gnawing at the edges of my confidence. By the time we landed, I felt smaller than I had in years. Looking back now, I can see it clearly. How carefully they built my trust. How they wrapped manipulation in concern. How they used my own sense of responsibility against me. They didn't force me onto that plane. They convinced me. And the most painful part, I helped them by believing. As we walked through the terminal that day, following signs I couldn't read, I told myself this trip was the start of something good. I had no idea it was the beginning of the worst betrayal of my life. Mini cliffhanger. If I had known what they were already planning before we even landed, I would have run. The first thing I noticed after we landed was the silence. Not the absence of sound. The airport was loud, chaotic, but the silence between us. The kind that stretches, uncomfortable and heavy, filled with things no one wants to say out loud. My sister walked a few steps ahead, her pace quick, impatient. My mother stayed close to her side, speaking in hushed tones I couldn't quite hear. Every now and then they glanced back at me, then quickly looked away. I told myself I was imagining it. Travel does this to people, I thought. Everyone's tired. But that explanation started to fall apart almost immediately. When we reached customs, my mother stepped forward before I could. She handed over all the documents, hers, my sister, and mine, without asking. Her movements were smooth, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this moment. I stood there empty-handed. That felt strange. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt without my passport in my possession. I watched the officer flip through the pages, stamp them, then return everything, not to me, but to my mother. She tucked them into her bag, without a word. I opened my mouth to say something, then closed it again. "Don't make a scene," that familiar inner voice warned. "You're overthinking." Outside the terminal, the air felt different, heavier, humid. The smells were unfamiliar, exhaust, food I couldn't name, something sharp and metallic that lingered in the back of my throat. I clutched my bag tighter. As we waited for transportation, I tried to ask simple questions. How long is the drive? Which hotel are we staying at? Each time, my sister answered with a sigh, as if my curiosity was an inconvenience. "Why do you need to know everything?" she snapped. "Just relax." The word relax felt like a slap. I went quiet after that. On the drive, I watched the city pass by through the window. Buildings crowded together. Signs I couldn't read. People who looked like they knew exactly where they were going. I had never felt more out of place. At the hotel, my mother checked us in while my sister scrolled on her phone. I stood off to the side, feeling less like a guest and more like an afterthought. When we got to the room, something else felt wrong. There were only 2 beds. I laughed nervously, assuming it was a mistake. "Did they mess up the reservation?" I asked. My sister didn't look up. "We'll figure it out." No urgency, no concern. That night, I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds outside, the distant hum of traffic, voices drifting up from the street below. My mind replayed every interaction from the day, searching for reassurance. Instead, all I found were more questions. Why did my mother insist on holding my documents? Why did my sister seem irritated by my presence? Why did I feel like I was being tolerated instead of welcomed? I told myself I was being dramatic. I had spent my whole life explaining away other people's behavior, making excuses, carrying blame that wasn't mine. This felt no different. The next morning, things escalated. When I reached for my passport before we left the room, my mother gently pushed my hand away. "I've got it," she said, smiling. "You'll just lose it." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. It wasn't concern. It was control. Still, I said nothing. We spent the day moving from place to place with no clear plan. I followed them through crowded streets, my senses overwhelmed. Heat clung to my skin. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck. Every sound felt amplified. At one point, I fell a few steps behind. I watched them walk ahead, side by side, talking and laughing. Without me. That image stayed with me. Later that evening, I overheard them whispering in the bathroom. My name slipped through the door, sharp and unmistakable. I froze. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I didn't need to. Their tone told me enough. I backed away quietly, my heart pounding. They're talking about me, I realized. I stood there, torn between confronting them and pretending I hadn't heard anything. Old habits won. I stayed silent. Looking back now, that was the moment I should have trusted my instincts. Every red flag was there. I just kept explaining them away. Because admitting the truth meant accepting something unbearable. That the people I loved were capable of planning my disappearance from their lives. Mini cliffhanger. I didn't know yet that they were already deciding when and where to leave me behind. Part 4. The night I realized I was truly alone. Word count, tilde 970 words. The night they left me didn't start with shouting or drama. It started quietly. Too quietly. We were supposed to return to the hotel together after dinner. I remember standing outside the restaurant, the warm night air heavy against my skin, neon lights flickering above us. Cars passed by in bursts of noise and color. Everything felt slightly unreal, like I was watching my life through a window instead of living it. My sister was unusually pleasant that evening. She laughed more, asked me questions, even ordered food for all of us like she was suddenly trying to include me again. That should have worried me. Instead, I felt relief. Maybe I was wrong, I thought. Maybe I imagined everything. After dinner, my mother suggested we stop by a small shop inside the airport terminal to pick up snacks for the night. She said it casually, like it was no big deal. "You can come with us," she said. "We just need a few minutes." Inside the terminal, the familiar sounds returned, rolling luggage, overlapping announcements, hurried footsteps. I felt a strange comfort being back in a place that felt organized and structured. We walked together at first. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the space between us widened. My sister stopped to check her phone. My mother paused near a counter. I took a few steps ahead, distracted by a flashing screen listing departures. When I turned around, they were gone. At first, I laughed under my breath. They're messing with me, I thought. They'll pop up any second. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. That uneasy silence from earlier returned, crawling up my spine. I pulled out my phone and called my sister. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. I tried my mother. No answer. That's when my chest tightened. I walked back and forth between the shops, scanning faces, calling their names softly at first, then louder. People looked at me with mild curiosity, then quickly looked away. I checked my bag instinctively. That's when I noticed it felt lighter. My hands trembled as I opened it. No passport. No ticket. No wallet. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. They hadn't wandered off. They had planned this. Heat rushed to my face, followed by a wave of dizziness. I leaned against a wall, pressing my palm to the cool surface to steady myself. Think, I told myself, just think. I tried to approach an information desk, but the words tangled in my throat. I didn't know how to explain my situation in a language I barely spoke. I felt stupid. Small. Ashamed. I walked into the bathroom and locked myself into a stall. The sound of the door clicking shut felt final, like something ending. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the wall, knees pulled tight to my chest. The tiles were cold. The air smelled like disinfectant and something sour underneath. That's when the tears came. Not loud sobs. Silent ones. Tears that soaked into my sleeve as I pressed my face into my arm, trying to muffle the sound of my own breathing. How could they do this to me? I thought. What kind of people plan something like this? Shame arrived before fear. Shame that I had trusted them. Shame that I hadn't protected myself. Shame that I was sitting on a bathroom floor in a country I didn't know, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me. Eventually, fear pushed its way in. Where would I sleep? How would I eat? What if someone took advantage of me? I imagined myself wandering the city alone at night, vulnerable and lost, and my stomach twisted. I checked my phone again, refreshing the screen even though I knew nothing would change. Still no signal. Hours seemed to pass in that stall. When I finally stood up, my legs were stiff and shaky. I splashed cold water on my face, stared at my reflection. My eyes were red and swollen. My expression looked unfamiliar, older, harder. You can't fall apart, I told myself. Not now. I gathered what little dignity I had left and stepped back into the terminal. People moved around me, unaware that my entire world had just collapsed. As the night stretched on, one terrifying truth settled deep into my bones. No one was coming back for me. I was on my own. And I had no idea how I was going to survive. Mini cliffhanger. I didn't know it yet, but that night would force me to make a decision that would change who I was forever. Night inside an airport feels different when you have nowhere to go. The lights never fully dim. The announcements echo longer than they should. Time stretches, thick and slow, until minutes feel like hours. I sat on a cold metal chair near the wall, clutching my bag like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. Around me, travelers slept with neck pillows and blankets, their bags tucked safely beneath their feet. Families huddled together. Couples leaned against each other, whispering, laughing softly. I felt invisible. Every few minutes, panic surged through me in waves. My heart would race, my palms would sweat, and I'd have to remind myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I tried to replay everything logically. Maybe they'll come back. That thought didn't last long. They had my documents, my money, my trust. This wasn't an accident. I approached a security officer, rehearsing the words in my head before speaking. My voice shook as I explained, slowly, carefully, that my family had left me and taken my passport. His expression shifted from confusion to skepticism. Family, he asked. I nodded. He asked more questions than I could answer. Where were they staying? Why did they leave? Did I have proof? Each question made me feel smaller. Without documents, without language, without anyone to vouch for me, my story sounded unbelievable, even to my own ears. Eventually, he sighed and gestured toward a bench. Wait here, he said. That was it. No reassurance, no solution. Just waiting. Hours passed. My phone battery dropped lower and lower until the screen finally went black. When it died, something inside me did too. The last fragile connection to the world disappeared. Hunger crept in quietly at first, then loudly. My stomach growled, sharp and insistent. I hadn't eaten much at dinner, nerves stealing my appetite. Now my body demanded attention. I searched my bag again, hopping, ridiculously, that something new might appear. Nothing. No money. No charger. No plan. As the night deepened, the airport grew quieter. Shops closed. The crowds thinned. Cleaning crews moved through the terminal, their carts squeaking softly. That's when fear changed shape. It stopped being loud and frantic. It became cold. Practical. I realized I had to survive the night. I found a corner near a wall, away from foot traffic, and curled up on the floor. I used my jacket as a pillow and hugged my knees to my chest to keep warm. The floor pressed hard against my bones. Every muscle ached. Sleep came in short, broken fragments. Each time I drifted off, I jolted awake, heart pounding, convinced someone was standing over me. At some point, footsteps stopped nearby. I opened my eyes. A man stood a few feet away, holding a mop. He looked at me, not with suspicion, not with annoyance, but with concern. "You okay?" he asked, his accent thick but his English clear. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed not to trust anyone. But exhaustion stripped away my defenses. I shook my head. He glanced around, then quietly placed a small bottle of water beside me. "Drink," he said. "It's cold here." Before I could respond, he walked away. That small kindness cracked something open inside me. I sipped the water slowly, letting it ground me. My hands shook less. My breathing steadied. Morning came without ceremony. The airport woke up again. Lights brighter, voices louder, movement everywhere. With daylight came a strange clarity. I can't stay here forever, I thought. I returned to the information desk and tried again. This time, I spoke firmer, forcing confidence into my voice even though my chest felt hollow. Eventually, a woman listened, really listened. She made calls, asked different questions, wrote things down. For the first time, I felt seen. She explained that without documents, my options were limited, but not non-existent. There were offices, processes, people who could help. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be easy. But it was something. As she spoke, I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't just abandoned anymore. I was fighting. That night in the airport had stripped me down to my most vulnerable self. But it also revealed something I didn't know I had. Resilience. I didn't know then that this airport, this place of fear and loss, would soon become the starting point of an unexpected alliance. That somewhere nearby, a stranger was watching out for me. Mini cliffhanger. I didn't know it yet, but the next person to notice me would change everything. I noticed him before I ever spoke to him. He stood near the far end of the terminal, close to a row of vending machines that hummed softly through the day. At first, I thought he was just another traveler killing time. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't carry luggage. He didn't move much at all. But every time I shifted in my seat, every time I stood up to pace or sat back down again, I felt it. His eyes. Not staring. Watching. Carefully. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. After everything that had happened, my nerves were raw. Anyone could look threatening when you were exhausted, hungry, and alone in a foreign place. Still, I kept my bag closer to my body. Hours passed like this. Occasionally, he'd disappear, down a hallway, around a corner, only to reappear minutes later, leaning against a different wall, as if he were making quiet rounds. That's when I noticed something else. Whenever security passed by, he nodded politely. When a cleaner struggled with a heavy cart, he helped push it for a few steps before stepping away again. When a lost child began to cry, he crouched down and pointed the boy toward a help desk. He wasn't drifting. He was paying attention. Still, I didn't approach him. Trust had become expensive. I sat with my thoughts instead, replaying the events that brought me here. The whispers, the missing documents, the bathroom stall, the cold floor. Each memory tightened my chest. I wondered what my family was doing at that exact moment. If they were relieved, if they were worried, if they were already rewriting the story in their heads, turning me into the villain so they wouldn't have to carry the guilt. The thought made my jaw clench. That's when the man finally approached. Slowly, deliberately. He stopped a few steps away, close enough to speak but far enough not to invade my space. He raised his hands slightly, palms visible. "I don't want to scare you," he said quietly, "but I've been seeing you here all day." My pulse spiked. "I'm fine," I said too quickly. He nodded, accepting the answer without pushing. "Okay," he replied. "If you need help, I'm here." Then he stepped back. Just like that. No questions, no pressure. That restraint confused me more than anything else. A few minutes later, he returned, not to me, but to the vending machine. He bought a sandwich and a juice. He placed them on the chair beside me without a word and walked away again. I stared at the food like it might disappear. My stomach twisted painfully. I waited. He didn't come back to claim it. Finally, hunger won. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't just the food. It was the dignity. He hadn't made me beg. After that, we spoke in fragments. A few words here, a nod there. He told me his name was Marcus. He didn't ask for mine right away. He asked practical questions instead. "Do you have anyone you can call?" I shook my head. "Documents." "No." He exhaled slowly, like someone doing mental math. "I've seen this before," he said. "It doesn't end quickly, but it can end safely." Something about the way he said made me believe him. Over the next few hours, he stayed nearby, not hovering, not crowding, just present. When I spoke to airport staff, he stood a respectful distance away, close enough that I felt less alone. He never touched me. Never asked for anything. Never made promises he couldn't keep. At one point, I asked him why he was helping me. He hesitated. "Because I know what it looks like when someone's been left behind," he said, "and because someone once did the same for me." I wanted to ask more. I didn't. Trust was growing, but it was fragile. As evening approached again, fatigue pressed down on me. My body ached. My thoughts slowed. Fear crept back in, whispering worst-case scenarios. Marcus noticed. "There's a safer place to sit overnight," he said. "More cameras, more people, less risk." I studied his face, searching for deception. I didn't find any. I nodded. As we walked, I realized something unsettling. I felt safer with a stranger than I ever had with my own family. That realization hurt more than the abandonment itself. We settled near a security-adjacent area, the hum of activity constant but distant. Marcus took a seat across from me, not beside me. "I'll stay nearby," he said. "You should rest." I closed my eyes. For the first time since being left behind, sleep came. Not deep, but enough. Mini cliffhanger. I didn't know it yet, but the next morning would force Marcus to reveal why helping me mattered more to him than he was letting on. Morning arrived without warning. One moment the terminal was wrapped in that strange, half-sleep silence of dawn, and the next it was buzzing, voices overlapping, suitcases rolling, announcements echoing sharply through the air. The sudden noise jolted me awake. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then reality slammed back into place. The airport, the night on the floor, the stranger who had stayed. Marcus. I lifted my head quickly, panic flaring when I didn't see him right away. My heart raced until I spotted him standing a few yards away, speaking quietly with a security officer. He glanced over, noticed I was awake, and gave a small nod. That simple gesture steadied me. But the calm didn't last. The officer's posture stiffened as the conversation continued. His tone sharpened. Marcus's shoulders tensed, though his voice remained even. Something was wrong. The officer gestured in my direction. I felt my stomach drop. Marcus walked back to me, slower now. "We might have a problem," he said under his breath. Those words hit harder than any shout. He explained quickly. Someone had reported a woman sleeping overnight in the terminal without proper documentation. Airport policy required verification. Questions, records. None of which I had. Fear flooded my system, hot and immediate. "What happens to me?" I whispered. Marcus hesitated. "That depends," he said carefully, "on who gets involved next." I followed him toward a small office near the security area. Each step felt heavier than the last. I noticed people watching us now, curious glances, whispered assumptions. I felt exposed. Inside the office, the air was stale and cold. A desk, 2 chairs, a computer humming softly. The officer asked questions. My name. My country. Why I was alone. Why my family left. With every answer, my voice grew quieter. Saying the words out loud made them feel more real and more humiliating. The officer's expression shifted from neutral to doubtful. "You're saying they took your passport intentionally?" he asked. "Yes," I said, though my confidence wavered. "Do you have proof?" "No." The silence that followed was unbearable. Marcus stood slightly behind me, close enough that I could sense him there. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He waited. That restraint saved me. The officer finally leaned back in his chair. "Without documentation, you can't stay here indefinitely," he said. "We may need to involve immigration services." The word immigration made my chest tighten painfully. I imagined locked rooms, cold questions, being treated like a criminal instead of a victim. My hands shook. Marcus spoke then. "He's not wrong," he said quietly, addressing me, not the officer. "But there are steps we can take before it gets there." The officer raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" Marcus met his gaze. "Someone who's seen this situation go bad when people panic," he replied. There was a pause. Then the officer sighed. He explained the process, consulates, reports, waiting periods, days, possibly weeks. I felt my knees weaken. I couldn't survive weeks like this. As we left the office, my composure cracked. Tears blurred my vision, frustration and fear mixing into something overwhelming. "I can't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't stay here like I don't exist." Marcus stopped walking. He turned to face me fully. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "This isn't the end. This is the hard part before things change." I wanted to believe him, but belief felt dangerous. We sat near the windows overlooking the runway. Planes took off and landed in a steady rhythm, indifferent to my crisis. That's when Marcus finally told me part of his story. "Years ago," he began, staring out at the tarmac, "I was the one being questioned. Different country, different reason, same feeling." I looked at him, surprised. "I trusted the wrong people," he continued. "Lost everything in one decision." He didn't give details. He didn't need to. The pain in his voice filled in the gaps. "That's why I didn't walk away from you," he said quietly. "Because I know what happens when no one stays." Something shifted inside me. I wasn't just being helped. I was being understood. But even as that comfort settled in, trouble loomed. A different officer approached. Higher rank. More serious expression. He asked Marcus to step aside. I watched them speak in low tones, my pulse pounding in my ears. Marcus glanced back at me once, his expression unreadable. When he returned, his face was tight. "They want to move you to a holding area while they verify information," he said. My breath caught. How long? He shook his head. I don't know. The world tilted. I realized then that staying quiet, staying polite, staying invisible, none of it was protecting me anymore. Something had to change. Mini cliffhanger. I didn't know it yet, but the choice I was about to make would put me directly in danger and set the stage for the moment Marcus would risk everything to save my life. What happened next unfolded so fast that my memory still struggles to keep it in order. One second, I was standing near the security desk, my heart pounding as an officer spoke into a radio. The next, a sharp crack cut through the terminal, metal striking metal, followed by a sound so violent it rattled the windows. Then came the screams. People turned toward the entrance in unison. A wave of confusion rippled through the terminal as alarms began to wail, their piercing sound slicing through the air. Red lights flashed. Smoke drifted in from outside, thin at first, then thicker. Everyone stay where you are, someone shouted. No one listened. Panic spread faster than the smoke. Travelers grabbed bags, children cried, voices overlapped in chaos. The orderly rhythm of the airport shattered in seconds. Marcus moved before anyone else did. Come with me, he said, his hand briefly brushing my arm. Not pulling, not forcing, just guiding. We moved against the crowd, toward the entrance instead of away from it. My instincts screamed that this was wrong, that we should be running in the opposite direction, but something in Marcus's posture, focused, grounded, cut through my fear. What's happening? I shouted over the noise. Fuel truck accident, he said. I smelled it before the alarm. The heat hit us as we got closer. It wasn't just warmth. It was a wall of it, heavy and suffocating, carrying the sharp sting of burning rubber and fuel. Smoke curled along the ceiling, turning the air gray. That's when I heard it. A weak voice. Help, please. It came from near the automatic doors, where a car had crashed through part of the barrier outside and skidded halfway into the terminal entrance. The front end was crushed, glass everywhere, flames licking up from beneath the hood. Inside the car, someone was trapped. People stood frozen, watching. Marcus didn't. He dropped his bag and ran. Marcus, I yelled. He didn't turn back. Everything slowed as I watched him reach the car. Flames flared higher, reflecting in the shattered glass. Smoke poured out in thick waves. He braced his feet and yanked at the door. It didn't budge. He tried again, muscles straining, jaw clenched. Still nothing. That's when part of the ceiling above us groaned. A chunk of debris fell, crashing just feet away from where I stood. Heat rushed up my legs. The alarms grew louder, almost deafening. Get back, someone screamed at me. I couldn't move. I was watching Marcus. He slammed his shoulder into the door again and again until it finally gave way with a screech of tearing metal. He reached inside, coughing violently as smoke swallowed him whole. I saw his face for just a moment. It was calm, determined. The same expression I'd seen when he handed me that sandwich. Time stretched. Then he pulled the driver free, a woman, limp and bleeding, barely conscious. Flames surged higher, roaring now, hungry. Marcus staggered back, dragging her away from the car. And then, something exploded. The blast knocked us both off our feet. I hit the ground hard, the air driven from my lungs. My ears rang, sharp and painful. For a terrifying second, I thought Marcus hadn't made it. Smoke swallowed everything. I coughed, gasping, my eyes burning. Shapes moved around me, shadows, legs, chaos. Then I saw him. He was on his knees a few feet away, shielding the woman with his own body as flames raced behind them. His jacket was singed. His hands shook, but he didn't let go of her. Security and emergency crews finally surged forward with extinguishers. White foam sprayed, hissing as it hit the fire. The flames shrank, then died. Sirens wailed outside. As order slowly returned, I crawled toward Marcus. "Are you okay?" I cried. He looked up at me, his face streaked with soot and sweat. "Are you?" he asked. That's when it hit me. He hadn't hesitated. Not for the fire. Not for the risk. Not for the fact that helping her, and helping me, might put him directly in trouble with authorities. I watched paramedics load the woman onto a stretcher. She was alive. Marcus had saved her. An officer approached us, eyes sharp, assessing. "You," he said to Marcus. "You ran into a fire. Who are you?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "Former firefighter," he said. "Volunteer before everything else." The words settled heavily between us. Firefighter. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The way he noticed danger before alarms. The way he moved with purpose, not panic. The way he stayed calm when everything fell apart. The officer studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You may have just saved multiple lives," he said. As they turned their attention back to the scene, Marcus sat down heavily, exhaustion crashing over him. I sat beside him, my hands still shaking. "You could have been killed," I whispered. He gave a tired half-smile. "So could you," he replied. I realized then how close I had come to losing the one person who had stood by me. And how quickly life could take everything, again. Mini cliffhanger. I didn't know it yet, but this fire would change more than our fates. It would force the truth about my family into the open. The airport didn't return to normal after the fire. It settled into something quieter, heavier, like everyone knew they'd come close to disaster and were still catching their breath. I sat with a blanket around my shoulders, hands wrapped around a paper cup of water I kept forgetting to drink. Across from me, Marcus had his forearms resting on his knees, staring at the floor like he was replaying every second of what had just happened. An officer approached us again, this time with a different tone. "Ma'am," he said to me gently, "we need to clear up your situation." My stomach tightened. This was it. He explained that after the emergency, authorities had reviewed camera footage. They had seen me with my family earlier. They had seen them leave without me. And they had seen who walked away with my documents. The truth was no longer just my word. "They've been located," the officer said. "They're still in the city." A sharp, painful relief cut through me. They hadn't disappeared. They had abandoned me. We were taken to a small interview room. This time, I wasn't alone. Marcus sat beside me. Not as my savior. As my witness. When my mother and sister were brought in, I barely recognized them. Their confidence was gone, replaced by tight expressions and defensive posture. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother tried first. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "She was supposed to meet us later." The officer didn't interrupt. He let her talk. That silence did more damage than confrontation ever could. Then the questions started. "Why did you take her passport? Why didn't you answer her calls? Why did you leave the airport?" Their answers tangled over each other. Contradictions piled up. The story they'd prepared fell apart in minutes. Finally, my sister snapped. "She was never supposed to come back with us," she said. "This was supposed to scare her, teach her a lesson." The room went still. "Teach me a lesson." The officer's expression hardened. My mother began to cry, not out of remorse, but fear of consequences. That's when I spoke. My voice shook at first, then steadied. "You planned to leave me," I said. "You took everything I needed to survive. You didn't care what happened after. Neither of them denied it. That silence was my answer. The officer stood. "Ma'am," he said to me, "you are not required to leave with them. We'll assist you with temporary documentation and consular contact." For the first time since boarding that plane, I felt something unlock inside my chest. Choice. But safety was still uncertain. Processing would take time, housing would take time, travel would take time. That's when Marcus leaned closer. He lowered his voice, so only I could hear him. "Pretend you're my wife." 6 words. Quiet. Unassuming. Life-saving. I stared at him. "What?" I whispered. "Just for now," he said calmly. "It gives you protection, a place to stay, time to breathe, no pressure beyond that." The officer looked at us expectantly. My heart pounded. I searched Marcus's face, really looked this time. No demand. No urgency. Just an offer. I nodded. "Yes," I said, "I'm his wife." The words felt surreal, but also safe. The shift was immediate, procedures changed, questions softened. The way people looked at me changed too, not as a problem, but as someone who belonged somewhere. That night, I didn't sleep on an airport floor. I slept in a quiet room, clean sheets pulled up to my chin, the sound of a city humming safely outside the window. Marcus stayed on the couch. He kept his promise. Over the following weeks, the arrangement stayed exactly what he said it would be. A contract. Boundaries. Respect. He helped me contact my consulate, helped me replace documents, helped me rebuild one practical step at a time. And slowly, something else happened. Trust stopped feeling dangerous. One evening, as we shared dinner in silence, I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt calm. Seen. Safe. My family tried to reach out. I didn't respond. Some betrayals don't deserve closure. Months later, standing on a quiet street, I watched Marcus laugh at something small and ordinary, and understood the truth I'd been avoiding. The man I had trusted, with a lie, had protected me with his life. And the people who raised me had tried to destroy it. Sometimes, family isn't who you're born to. Sometimes, it's the person who stays when everyone else walks away.